Welcome back. This short video, we'll take a look at the nutrient windows for feeding liquids, grains, and forages, and just have a quick overview of how they're used and the methods that we can do to manipulate them. So let's take a quick look and see how this goes. Okay, so we have our GPS program all lined up. Now we're going to take a look at the windows for feeding liquids, grains, and forages. We'll begin with the feeding the grains. We'll take a look at the composition of the grain, and here's my first window. They're all pretty much the same. And as you notice, you'll see the main components of the windows, the name, so you know where you are. The number of feeds that we've offered, here we have 2. The number of nutrients, in this case we're looking at 10 separate nutrients, and whether we are actually looking at the nutrients or the feeding program. You'll see the grid of the information, including the name of the product and the nutrients here for each feed 1 and 2 in this case. Up in the upper right-hand corner, we have the typical window controls. We can minimize this window and pop it back up again. We can maximize the window, or we can X out of it. And when we X out of it, it doesn't actually go away. It's only going to be hidden. And then here down at the bottom, we have the OK button, which will basically do the same thing. Okay, so in order to manipulate this, we can select the number of feeds, and I think I've already mentioned we can have up to 6 feeds for each group category. And you'll notice that when I add here, now adding feed number 3, you'll notice that the nutrients are all set to 0. And in this case, we haven't populated the grid yet. We've only created the new feed. So I'll need to go to the grains. So the grains that are available here are calf starters and growers. And I'm going to pick the 16. Actually, I want the 14 grower. And once I select that, then you'll notice that the nutrients are all populated. So in this case, I'm now looking at 3 feeds instead of only 2. Now you'll notice there are, in this case, 10 nutrients, and I can look at any number of nutrients, and be careful because there are lots of nutrients. For the dry feeds there are 52, and for the liquid feeds there are about 130. Now we don't have all of these, but all of these as nutrients, as components of the ration. However, we do have things like the feeding program and so forth that are considered nutrients in the way the GPS is set up. So I'm going to select, let's select 16, and you'll notice that right now the number of nutrients overrides, is bigger than the width of the window. I can do a couple of things. I can increase the window size, or I can use the scroll bar down here. And either way will work. I can maximize the screen as well. Okay. Now, in certain cases, there may be some of these nutrients that I'm really not interested in. So for example, if I am not terribly concerned about ADF, if I click the left mouse button on that, the ADF column will go away. It won't actually be deleted from the data set, but it will be hidden from you so that you don't need to look at it. Lignin, I can do the same. So any number of these I can do. So for example, if I'm looking at the composition of the liquids, I'm certainly not going to be interested in starch levels or NDF or ADF. So as I click, these things go away. Now, if I go back and reset and increase them, the program automatically resets all of the columns. So if you happen to lose one that you by accident, you can simply reset the nutrients and they'll come back again. Okay, so I'm getting rid of ADF, NDF, starch, and lignin. I don't need to look at those. Now there may be some that the nutrient that I particularly want to look at, but I'm not sure exactly where it is here. So if I right click on the mouse button, you'll notice up here suddenly there's a nutrient to add. And here we have all of the nutrients that are available for us to add. So for example, if I might be interested in the magnesium concentration, I can now see that. Now notice too that all of these cells columns can be can be expanded or reduced just by the way you want. And if I double click on them, they will open to a fixed number. So you have that capability as well. And we can do the same for the rows if we want to as well, just to make them bigger. So this is all good for manipulation. Okay, so let's now look at the feeding program. Now, the feeding program for liquids is somewhat unique. Here we have the milk replacer, and we have a series of periods. Period 1, with a begin day, end day, and number of grams fed, are the first 3 columns. Then we move to period 2, begin and grams. Period 3, begin and grams. So that they're all organized the same way. And so I can look at these and see that we begin on day 3. From day 3 to day 7, I'm feeding 600 grams of milk replacer powder per day. Then on day 8, which is the next day after the end of period 1, then I will begin feeding the next period. I can enter any day here, period to day 24, and now I'm feeding 750 grams. You'll notice the begin days are all in gray. That's because we can't manipulate them. We can't change those. And if I try to click on that cell, or as I move to that next cell with the tab key or enter key, it will jump over those begin days. That's just because they're automatically set to be the next day after the end of the previous period. Okay, so we don't need to worry about manipulating those. Okay, so now if I go on period 3, we begin on day 25, end on day 63, then you'll notice here I have to be careful because this will cause some confusion in the program if I'm not careful about how I arrange all of these feeding plans. Now I have a number of steps here that you can see. These are the number of periods. So right now I have 5 periods. I can have up to 20 if I would like, and I can manipulate those as I go. So if I only want to have 3, I have periods 1, 2, and 3. If I go back to period 5, you'll notice that the days will stay populated, but the number of grams will be set to 0. So in this case, I don't need to worry about the end days. As long as the grams are set to 0, then everything will be calculated properly. Okay, so that shows me the periods for liquids. Okay, I'm going to X out of here and look at the forage feeding program, or we'll start with the composition. Everything's laid out the same way. They're all set up. The nutrient grids are set up exactly the same way for the dry feeds and the liquid feeds, except the feeding program. When I click on the feeding program here, it'll be the same for grains and for forages. So here I have one forage, which is sorghum hay. It costs me $150 per ton, and all of these are set as metric tons, by the way. We're going to begin offering this forage at 45 days and end at day 122. I can select any of those. The first day needs to come before the last day, of course. The maximum is currently set at 9, and it's always best to make sure you have a number here. Don't set it to 0, or else GPS will assume that you don't want to feed any of that at all. So you can set it to 9, or you can set it to 99. As long as it's higher than what the program is calculating the intake will be, then we're basically at ad libitum. The percent forage of the dry matter, in this case, I am assuming that the calves are going to eat this forage for ad lib consumption and will eat it at a rate of 8% of dry matter. Now, normally in our research, we think that the average ad lib intake of forages is somewhere between 6 and 8% of total forage dry matter, depending on which research you see. So I can change that to 6, or I can change it, but somewhere in the range of 6 to 8 for dry forages is about where you want to be. And the additive column here allows us to adjust the rate of daily gain basis any additives that might be added to the feed that might improve performance. So for example, an additive called Neotec 4, Neotec 5, those additives will increase the rate of average daily gain. Now, rather than trying to change the digestibilities and the metabolizabilities as a result of these additives, we're simply going to adjust the dry feed intake and the average daily gain. In this case, I'll increase the growth rate and intake by 5%. Okay, so here we are. Okay, so these are the boxes and the feeding grids, and this is where we put in all the feeding information for all of our rations. And you'll notice that even though I X'd out of my grains, I'm still now feeding 3 grains. Let's go back to the feeding program here. It's laid out exactly the same as is the forage. I have my costs, first and last days, maximum, percent forages, and additives. Now, if I get rid of that third feed, and I'm going to set the maximum for the grower, let's set it to 3 kilos. And you may notice over here on the right, as I change this, then the program will update the simulation and will change the animal performance intake and growth rates. And so you might notice the body weight line here, this light blue line here, will change as I change the feed intake. Okay, so you'll see there are a number of small changes that take place, and in this daily performance box you might also see some changes that are occurring. So in this case, when we're feeding forage ad libitum and grain ad libitum up to a maximum of 9 kilos, my ending body weight is about 144 kilos. If I limit growth to our intake of this grower to 3 kilos, my ending body weight will be about 138 kilos. So that's a drop of about 6 kilos. So all of these can be adjusted and changed, and this is how we manage the inputs of nutrients to the program. So I hope that's helpful. Look forward to another installment of using GPS. Come back soon.